Got it? Hey guys, welcome to the Do Nothing Project, our continuing experiment in weekly virtual Sangha, or practice different techniques, usually with a variation on the elemental, the simple side of meditation, basic training of equanimity, of concentration, clarity. And it's just good to be hanging out here with you guys. So Sarah, my wife, who you may notice has we're 2 months away from having our first kid. She is going to lead a practice that I love, that she loves, and I'll let her say a little bit about that. But we're going to go into it pretty quickly. Welcome, everybody. And then afterwards, I thought I'd say a little bit about, there's a couple questions I was going to ask that people had emailed in, but I also want to say a little bit about, the basic training of meditation. This idea that at a very deep level in meditation, we're training how to be content, independent of external conditions, which is a very radical claim. And I thought I'd say a little bit more about that afterwards. I think I've talked about it before. I mean, it's the central thing, no doubt I have. But I'll talk a little bit about two different approaches to doing that. The kind of classic approach in meditation of kind of slowly building up the skills of concentration, clarity, equanimity, and just in general, that making your life better, kind of a bottom-up approach. But I want to talk a little bit about the top-down approaches, in particular one that I've been deeply influenced by for years and have had some of my most deep experiences that come about from that. These are more top-down, non-dual perspectives. So we'll talk a little bit more about that afterwards. But right now we're going to meditate. What's up, everybody? So, my love, do you want to say something about this technique we're going to do?
Absolutely. So, hi everyone. Thanks for joining Jeff and I tonight. Again, my name is Sarah. I'm Jeff's wife, and I wanted to share my favorite technique, one of my favorite techniques with you tonight. This is a technique developed by the teacher Culadasa, American teacher, spent some time in Canada as well, actually, otherwise known as John Yates. Who really developed a wonderful concentration technique. So this is focused on concentration. It's a technique from his amazing book, The Mind Illuminated. Highly recommended, especially if you really like to get very technical and clear about how meditation works. A book that was a wedding present for us from Avi Kramer, from our fellow teacher here in Toronto. And it's a way of approaching concentration that can be a bit freeing for some people, because rather than focusing in on the object to the exclusion of all else, you're actually allowing and you kind of want a little bit of background awareness to stay with you as you're concentrating. And his idea was that that in the long run, this can actually help you sense distractions in your environment before they distract you, because you haven't become hyper-focused. And if you follow his steps into kind of the harder steps, that it also involves a mindfulness practice. So it's kind of like a concentration mindfulness practice. But the simple version we're going to do tonight is mostly focused on concentration. So yeah, we'll get started.
Okay, so 25 minutes we'll do it for.
Perfect.
I'll start.
And it's got 3 stages. So I'll lead you through them one by one. So get comfortable in your cushion. Feel the cushion beneath you. And just take a deep breath. As you breathe in, stretching up the spine, finding a sense of alertness. And on the out breath, Just kind of letting your body settle on the cushion. And right at the start, we're going to bring to mind your motivation to sit in meditation today. This is something Culadasa says really helps with staying focused while you're on the cushion. So it could be just a word, an image, an idea. It could be as simple as wanting more peace, or as complex as aiming for enlightenment. And once you've brought that motivation to mind, I also want you to bring to mind any distractions that might come in the next 25 minutes. And you can just kind of bring to mind a couple that you think might or tend to come up, whether it's body discomfort, sounds coming from the next apartment, or intrusive thoughts. And once you've thought of these, I'd like you to accept them, accept that they might happen, and commit to coming back to your object of focus, even if these distractions come up. And I'll let you know what that object of focus is. So we're going to start out broad. We're going to start out in what Culadasa calls our peripheral awareness. And our peripheral awareness includes everything. Includes sounds, our sense of space, sense of what's all around us, our bodies, the cushion beneath us, emotions. Take this broad focus for a couple of minutes. This peripheral awareness is what we're going to have in the background as we try to focus on our breath in the foreground. But just practice focusing on your peripheral awareness for a few minutes. If your attention kind of wanders from thing to thing, that's all right. All right. Now that you've gotten a sense of that broad awareness of kind of the background that's always being sensed by you, but rarely in a conscious or focused way, I'd I'd like you to focus on your breath. And by breath, I mean all the sensations in your body that might be associated with your breath. So all the way down from your belly up to your chest, into your throat, and at the tip of the nose. So your whole breath. So try to get a sense of the whole breath coming in and going out. You're going to want to focus most of your attention on your breath, on the sensation of it, the heat and coolness of it, how it really feels going in and out. But then don't lose your sense of that background awareness that we began with. So you're kind of keeping maybe 20% of your attention on just a background sense of sounds, space in the room, feeling of having a body on the cushion, even thoughts if they're kind of bouncing around in there. So let's try this. And if your attention wanders, just gently bring it back to the breath. And congratulate yourself on having noticed that your attention wandered, because that's a moment of mindfulness. If any feelings of relaxation or pleasure come up as you do this, just gently lean into those pleasurable feelings. They grease the wheels of concentration. Okay. And the last stage is we're going to keep going with this, but we're just going to focus our attention on just the sensations of breath at the tip of the nose and on the upper lip. So rather than the breath in the belly or in the chest, just the sensations at the tip of the nose. And this can be harder to focus in on, but you can keep some of your background attention on kind of your peripheral awareness of everything else going on. And a way to stay focused on sensations of the breath, or just to get as granular about those sensations as you can. The coolness of the breath on the in-breath, the slightly warmer temperature as you breathe out. And compare the length of the in and out breath. See if one's longer than the other. See if your breath changes the longer you meditate. See if you can notice the pause at the end of the in-breath and at the end of the out-breath. Just turning up the resolution on how vividly you can notice details about the breath at the tip of the nose, the tip of the nostrils. If your mind wanders, just gently bring it back to the breath at the tip of the nose. Great. And for the last minute, just gently release all effort, all striving to focus on the breath. Just release the breath. And just kind of see what happens. Your attention might kind of go broad again. It kind of might bounce around, or you might actually just stay with the breath without even trying. Just kind of release all effort and see what happens. Thanks for practicing with us.
That was awesome.
So if you have any questions about that practice, feel free to let us know in the comments.
Or send one later.
Or send one later.
Nice. Humanities bow from Andrew.
Yes. Do the humanities bow. And if you're curious, the name of the person who teaches that is Culadasa, but it's spelled Culadasa.
I should have just grabbed the book we have downstairs. So I love that practice. I wanted to say something about kind of meditation and the and practice in general and why we do it a little bit, maybe coming at it from a slightly different angle. I thought I'd use the example of the meditation I just did for myself to kind of try to help explain it. Because basically, here you are in life, and it's like, boom, we're here, and there's all these challenges, and there's always good stuff, and there's bad stuff, and practice basically helps us with our own existence as far as I'm concerned. And I kind of see it doing that. For me, it's done it in two primary ways. It's done it through trying to quiet my mind from the bottom up, meaning slowly doing techniques just to make me a little bit more calm, a little bit more settled, a little bit more open, a little bit more compassionate. And that's like the skill building side. You're building up the concentration, building up the clarity, the equanimity, and they kind of flow out more and more into your life. That's the common sense side, just like any skill building. And that's definitely one half of kind of how I've thought about it. But I've also looked at it from the other side, which is from the top down, which is which is basically like, where can a human being get to? Where if the first approach is from the bottom up is about changing conditions to be more suitable to a better life, from the top down, it's going straight to a place where you're actually learning how to be okay independent of conditions. And that may not make a lot of sense, that distinction right now. But that's an entire category of practices you could call non-dual practices. You could call, there's in Malamudra and Dzogchen within Tibetan Buddhism. They're basically ideas. They start with exploring the nature of experience right now and trying to point you to how we're all fundamentally free in this moment right now. That there's an orientation in our experience that's absolutely free. We just sort of don't notice it. It's like we're a little bit hypnotized by stuff going on all around us. But if we can kind of turn our minds sidelong ever so slightly, we notice there's a way of looking at experience that is immediately starts to free things up. And the longer we know that, the longer we spend there, the more free things get. And this has been, so like, I mean, there are so many different teachers who work within this tradition. Famously in our culture, people like Eckhart Tolle, Adyashanti, they're kind of like typical mainstream non-dual teachers, but they're ones that I really like. This guy is one of my favorite. His name is Rupert Spira. He's a guy I have been studying with for a long time. Another one here I really like, this guy, Robert Wolf, an American non-dual teacher. And so, again, I don't know how much this is going to land because this is a bit different than what most meditators are used to, but the basic understanding is in that position is you start like, okay, it's the kind of who am I self-inquiry. Who am I? What is awareness? What is the nature of awareness? Like, what is it that's never changing in my experience? And that's a question that really works for me. When I start to pay attention to what's never changing in my experience, I realize, well, everything's always changing. But the knowing of my experience, the fact that experience is known, whether I'm super contracted and all I'm knowing is the fact that I really need to take a dump, or all I'm knowing is the fact that I like that bird or that I'm in agony, I'm knowing that thing. And you can basically start to realize that you are the knower. You're not the thing you know. In this first stage is like, you're just the knower itself. And what happens if you just begin to pretend that you are that thing? And you start to kind of do an inquiry into that. And it sounds like the most common sense thing, or it's very hard to kind of get your head around what it is. But at a certain point, things can start to shift, and it can be a real accelerator of practice. It becomes a place you can stand in independent of conditions. And I really feel like I did not explain that well, because it's notoriously impossible to talk about. And it's the kind of mystical thing that's really hard. But just to give you a real life example, in that meditation that I did, so I was following Sarah's instructions exactly. I was getting, I started by being open and aware, and it's nice. I like that place. It's kind of an open, aware place. I'm like equanimous. Then I kind of narrowed down to notice my breath and to notice my nostril. As I was doing it, I could see I was getting a little bit more concentrated. As I was getting more concentrated, I could see my thoughts start to settle, all of which was giving me some peace in conditions. It was changing the conditions of my mind to be a little bit more settled, which is great. But then I was noticing that as I was doing all of it, I didn't care at all. Wasn't trying to make anything happen. I didn't care if I was concentrated or not concentrated, if I was open or not open, because all those things are the same in that they're all known. I know myself as the knower. So I know myself knowing the breath when it's soft or knowing the breath when it's jagged. I'm the knower whether I'm having thoughts or whether I'm hearing sound. The knower is always there. I know that's the only place I have to get to. There's nowhere to get to. So there's a deep kind of like tranquility in the meditation now for me when I practice, where I don't really feel like I'm trying to get anywhere. And because of that, the meditation ends up being that much more deep and effective. I don't know if that makes sense, but I thought I would at least attempt to explain that. We'll probably not use this as a small clip because it's probably too complicated. I'm going to see what some of the things are here. Yeah, okay. Oh, yeah, great. So Chad's saying this is a topic that was just talked about in a great podcast called Deconstruct Yourself. I'm glad. Great. Okay, we got a bunch of comments here. So there's that. So I thought I had a bunch of questions that people had been emailing in, so I wanted to answer a few just quickly now too. One was about hitting a plateau in practice. This was a fellow named Jim who wrote in, who said that basically feels like his practice has hit a plateau. Says life events have caught up to me. He has got a couple of hard things going on. A dad with dementia, and then a difficult relative, and that he's finding these two stressors to be very difficult. That he's the difficult relative causes him to obsess about that and not be paying attention to his dad the way he wants to, and he's just feeling a little bit like the practice isn't really working the way I'm gathered the way it once did. And he meditates for 10 minutes every morning, and he's welcoming any further advice. So this actually fits very well with what I was just talking about. So regardless of what your practice is, whether your practice is to slowly build up in this rote way your capacity to concentrate, to be equanimous, to be clear, or to investigate your experience from the top down, these are both ways that you just do these practices no matter what's going on in your life. Things are shit, things are great. Things are shit, things are great. It's like always going to be an up and down. The idea is that you just have a kind of stalwart practice that you go to. And inevitably in your life, there'll be times when the intensity of what's going on in your life is so it overwhelms what feels like the good of the practice, but still you stay with it because it's the long game. And, for me, when my circumstances are really hard, I can give you different interventions to deal with hard circumstances, like doing a compassion practice on yourself, doing compassion practice with your dad, even with that difficult relative. There's lots of, if you look at the 10% Happier app, most of those are like interventions of the moment that can help shift different situations or states. But in the big picture of a practice, there's just the sitting down and following the breath, no matter what's going on in your life. You do it when it's snowing, you do it when it's raining, you do it when it's sunny. Over time, that builds up the capacity to be with all those things. So you just get better at handling those kinds of situations. And a non-dual practice, like I talked about, a top-down practice, does the same thing. It has the equivalent of basically showing you that the stuff going on in your life it's all coming and going and changing. And, you are the knower of it. And that, as the knower, you're unstained by that. Because the knower is not made out of anything. The knower just knows. You're the thing that is just knowing. That's sort of like this slippery, empty thing in all experience that can't be touched. And the more you practice knowing your fundamental identity as that, the more the intensities of life you're able to take in stride and be more dignified and respond more intelligently. So that would be a response to that. Yeah, and then one more just quick question here. This was from Dawn, and she had a kind of 3-part question, very short. She says, Jeff, when I'm focusing on my breathing, I have trouble noticing it at my nostrils or in my belly. I can feel my chest rise, but not the breath per se, and I seem to feel my breath most in my throat. Weird, huh? I assume this is okay? So that's the first part of the question. Yes. So everyone feels these things differently. You don't even have to use the breath if you don't like as an object. The idea of finding an object is just something that can kind of be like an organizing principle in your experience, something to use to train up the concentration, the clarity, the equanimity. You could do it in a super open way, the way Sarah started us out. And if that feels good for you, you can stay there. But a lot of people find it makes them a little bit too distracted. So they choose something to pay attention to. So it could be any part of the breath. It's normal for the breath to get really, really subtle to the point where you don't feel it anymore. So you start by just noticing what part of it you feel. And after a while, even if it gets faded out, you can sort of hold your attention in the direction it was. Or you can, at that point, shift to something else, sounds or a body. Or maybe you find you don't even need to, that you're able to just kind of focus on the point of where it was, even though the breath is gone. So that's the breath part. She also says that she can't sit like a pretzel, but she's committed to the practice to try to get there, worried that if she focuses on that discomfort too much, it'll mess things up. Any advice? Yes, get comfortable. Don't meditate in an uncomfortable position. I mean, you can use it as a way to train up equanimity, but for the most part, just like make it easy on yourself. Sit like we're sitting on a couch, put some pillows up to support your back. You want to basically be upright so you're awake, but you want to be relaxed. If you have too much pain, it'll be just too distracting. Although you can work with the pain to get to a deeper level of concentration, but I say that's something to kind of work on a little bit further into the practice. And finally, she says, the whole duality, deep end of the pool kind of freaks me out. Is it okay to wear water wings and stay in the shallow end? Yes, it's okay. I mean, the brutal truth there is there's no informed consent to the deep end. You can be doing the most shallow practice in the world, just sitting there, noticing your breath, and you're only doing it for 5 or 10 minutes a day. And it's super chill. It helps you not be stressed. But at some point, boom, you're all of a sudden up face against your own existence in this way that you never thought you would. It forces you in a way. A practice will bring you into an encounter with your life. It often does it in a way that's paced, and that kind of works at a pace for us, but you never know how it's going to go. Sometimes you can be a complete beginner and all of a sudden have a big insight into kind of the cosmic side of things. And that can be a beautiful thing, or it can be a kind of thing that freaks us out a bit. And there's no way to completely protect against that. And I would say that's true even outside of doing meditation or any practice. You could be on the bus one day and suddenly be thinking about your existence and realize something about who you are and how you've been that completely changes your life. That's being a human being. That's life. You can't control the when or where that's going to happen, although practice sort of makes you accident prone in a sense. So I hope that makes sense. See a few more comments here. Yeah, the whole practice will be posted later. Someone's asked here. Awesome, guys. Anything you want to say, sweetie?
No, the practice that we did today and the conversation about non-duality are definitely two different approaches to meditation. They don't specifically have anything to do with each other, but it's a good illustration of just those two different poles. The bottom-up practice we did was classic bottom-up. You're training the skill of concentration so that you can see better the nature of what really is. You're focusing on just a tiny little piece of reality, which is the breath, but it's training those bottom-up skills. Whereas what Jeff is talking about is the top-down. It's shifting your orientation towards the world in a more fundamental way right off the bat, without worrying about focusing on these sensory details. Nice. That was probably a better description than I ever could have made. Okay, so thank you. We're good. We good, my love? Good. Yeah. Okay. I'm gonna let you guys go to bed. I hope you enjoyed the meditation. Someone mentioned Locke Kelly, also a great non-dual teacher. Yeah, Locke Kelly. I have his book here too. Really good. Shift into Freedom. Okay. Bye, guys. See you next week.